tears turn to laughter that child long ago. My soul starts to linger, it's home I know. If you catch me daydreaming now and forever, thoughts are carrying me along to that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we roam. Whenever I go to that place I know it'll always be home, home to me.
It was here, one night in 1882, that a Methodist minister turned real estate agent stood. John Lake represented the Temperance Colonization Society of Toronto, and he'd been sent from the East to establish a dry colony. No booze, no saloons allowed. This is the spot he chose. "Arise, Saskatoon, Queen of the North," he proclaimed. And arise she did. Setting the temperance element aside, the city of today not only lived up to Lake's expectations, but went far beyond.
It began with a nomadic Cree. They called it Saskatoon, after a red berry that grew in the region. Thousands of years ago, they saw the riverbank as a spiritual gathering place. The vision continued with the waves of permanent settlers who put down roots and called it home. The bridges that span the power of the river, with its fertile banks holding off oceans of prairie, have come to symbolize the spirit of enterprise, and along with it, a richness of culture that has developed and been nurtured in this frontier town. Dreaming, and the challenge of fulfilling those dreams, is the stuff that Saskatoon has come to understand. The South Saskatchewan River represents the solitude of the prairie it crosses. It has been the lifeblood for generations in Saskatoon. Local resident Hugh Arscott.
You've got to remember why Saskatoon is here. Basically, it's water. It's water, and there was a spot where they could easily cross the river. And that spot was what was called the Long Hill, the Short Hill, just below Nutana Collegiate. They could get down the bank there with Red River ox carts, and the crossing was at the bottom where the old traffic bridge is now.
With an advance party of 13, John Lake had set out to pick a site for an administrative center of a temperance colony. The society had been incorporated in March of the same year, with the sole purpose of creating a community far away from the bars and taverns of Toronto. It was the summer of 1882, and the Red River carts could be heard over the prairie landscape. They saw the open expanse of land and the river valley as a perfect retreat. The following summer, the first wave of settlers began to arrive. The new town site was surveyed according to Lake's ambitious plans. The colony began to develop, but its dream of isolation from a liquor-filled world was soon to be dashed.
The temperance colony had a very real influence on Saskatoon's growth. They were primarily on the Nutana side, and they hoped to have a dry colony here. Unfortunately, their sections of land they obtained were on a checkerboard pattern, so that the black ones could be dry, but the white ones were wet, and it kind of destroyed the whole system that they had planned.
The whole idea of a temperance colony on the banks of the South Saskatchewan gradually disappeared as development sprang up around the original town site. The sound of change was in the air, and Saskatoon was not going to be kept waiting. In 8 short years, no less than 4 railways would meet in Saskatoon. The economic possibilities were enormous, but the Board of Trade of the day was taking no chances. During the first run of the CPR to Saskatoon on June 15, 1908, they organized an excursion of 100 Winnipeg businessmen. It worked. They liked what they saw, and it opened a floodgate of wholesalers and distributors.
The Advance Roomley Tractor. In its day, this gigantic concrete building housed a massive showroom for Advance Roomley tractors. The floors are designed to carry 650 pounds per square foot, and the elevator, which brought machinery from the lower floors to this 5th floor showroom, is still the largest in Canada. The homesteaders were rushing west, and tractors were a hot item. This catalog from about 1917 lists more than 20 different types of equipment. Saskatoon was booming.
Local merchants had developed a reputation for cashing in on good business opportunities. The city had its eye on supplying the growing needs of the region. Although commerce would fluctuate with the seasons, an interdependence grew with the agrarian-based market, and that relationship would remain interwoven. Surrounding lands yielded crops that meant cash for farmers and increased demands.
It was not just a distribution center for goods, but for services. The lawyers, the accountants, would be busy once harvest was over, and people would come to town to do their business. And by the time spring came and the farmers went back on the land, there was hardly anything doing in Saskatoon.
The city of Bridges would continue to thrive. New industry would develop, and commerce soon became active year-round. The Laurier government circulated Canada West magazine worldwide with its promise of homes for millions. When the boom ended with the First Great War, 1 Canadian in 4 was in the West.
My mother used to say that she came out with her mother, and her mother was 48. And she was considered an old person in Saskatoon. 48. There just were no old people here. Everybody had come from somewhere else. And they had left homes and family, and they had to get along. And they'd come from such a diversity of backgrounds. They were thrown into this pot. And they were held together by a tremendous spirit that we're going to make it, we're going to succeed. And the Saskatoon spirit was just so real.
That spirit is what still defines Saskatoon. They came from the old world, north from the United States, west from the Maritimes and Ontario, all seeking their fortune. It attracted like-minded settlers, such as the grandparents of Ray Graves, president of the Saskatoon Boiler Company.
My grandfather came out from Ontario in 1906 and sold steam tractors and farm equipment in its heyday. Another family came out also from Ontario and started a welding shop in about 1914. Since boiler making was a big part of keeping steam engines running, that's how boiler making got started in our family. My father trained as a boiler maker and I trained as a boiler maker. Because Saskatoon is somewhat isolated industrially from the major centers of Toronto, Montreal, we have to be more self-sufficient than we would have to be if we were in one of the larger areas. So we're able to take advantage of the skills and ingenuity of the local people to do the different things that we have to have done and have to do ourselves just because we have no one else to do them for us. Anybody that survives on a farm tends to be pretty ingenious and have some initiative. One of the advantages of a smaller industrial community is that people grow up together and work together very well. It's much easier to work with somebody that you've grown up with and maybe gone to school with and see socially. I think there's a general optimism here that you don't often find. We don't tend to concentrate on a lot of reasons why something cannot be done. We tend to look for that one reason why we can do something. And this is why even during the Depression that there were community projects went on that were virtually impossible, but they were done.
In 1936, when the Saskatchewan wheat production fell to 110 million bushels and the Rough Riders couldn't go east for the Grey Cup, everyone was sure things could only improve. Hardship was nothing new to the people of the prairie. Throughout the gloomy decade, the West retained its character as the great next year country. The Hotel Bessborough. Built in the heart of the Depression by the CNR, it stood as a symbol of pride at a time when many had their dreams shattered by the events of the dirty 30s. When the doors swung open, over 1,000 people danced to the hope of better times.
It was built, opened, and they had a hell of a party there. I think it was about 1930. They had snake lines. They danced all night.
The hotel attracted people from across the prairies, and the castle on the river became the focus of Saskatoon.
So the Bessborough Hotel really was our community center. And I'm speaking not just of the family, I'm speaking of, to go to the Bessborough Hotel was an occasion.
The Bess, as it is fondly known, the Saskatoon Symphony, and Barney Cutts are synonymous. Cutts has been walking in and out of the hotel for as long as he cares to remember. And he still loves his tailor shop here. Hello, Barney.
Well,
How are you?
nice to see you.
Good to see you again.
See you.
How's business?
Good.
Good, you're looking very dapper. I like that suit. Barney, you're one of the very few people that I know who became a musician, as you say, out of necessity. How come?
Well, as I said, I think that mostly because I wanted to eat. I like to eat, and I also I like musicians, if that's possible.
Yes,
and,
it is.
Yeah, and actors, and I like that kind of a society in reality. So I was real happy to be involved.
You've been with the symphony for more than 40 years now. Tell me about it when it was like a fairly new orchestra, when you first joined.
Well, it was an amateur orchestra, and the people were very enthusiastic about doing the job, and I fitted in because I was really a rank amateur as well.
Did you get paid?
I remember I needed $1 to take a taxi with my bass, you know. They had to have a meeting.
I noticed on the wall of your shop here you have a picture of the hotel when it was under construction. When was that?
Well, I believe that picture was in about 1930. I think that picture was taken.
It took a long time to build
Yes, well, it did, because it was done, you know, like, we'll say by hand.
Well, when the Bessborough Hotel was first built, it was the dominant landmark in the whole area. Was it a society hotel? Was it that kind of fancy, posh hotel?
Well, in my opinion, it still is, and it is the place, and I believe this would be the place you would go if you could afford the $1.50 for a dinner dance or something.
People wore cut suits to come to the society
Yeah,
events
hopefully,
in the
yeah.
Bespra.
Hopefully, yeah.
You've got your whole family is in the music business.
Yeah, my son is a good bass player.
Did you teach him?
Started him, yeah, which was a terrific mistake.
Why?
Well, you know, like I wanted to give him lessons because, you know, I come from the farm and I used to work and, you know, not just sitting around doing nothing. So
Yeah.
I had to, the only thing I could think of was to get him into music. There was no ashes to take out or anything. You know? So I traded a suit for a cello. And I started him on the cello. And, you know, he used to hate it. And, you know, you're supposed to cuddle a cello, hold it up
Yeah.
like this. He held it away out here.
So I guess you're going to stay around for a while.
Yeah, well, Saskatoon is really a great place. You know, the quality, like when you've lived in the East and then you come back here, quality is pretty high here, in my opinion. Yeah.
In the music.
Yeah, well, in music and just in general.
The sounds of music would drift from the turrets of the Hotel Bespera and over the Broadway Bridge, haunting the spirits of the old temperance colony on the East Bank. Natana, which is Cree for firstborn, was the name given to the original town site. Its focal point, Broadway Avenue, had kept pace in its own way. But there has always been a serious rivalry between the two sides of the river. It is sometimes settled, after a fashion, in an annual face-off, East versus West, in an all-star hockey game. But the friendly competition that has existed between the two banks of the South Saskatchewan has not stood in the way of mutual progress. Education has been an important ingredient in the mix of Saskatoon society. From the original school site in Natana, the leaders of the community emerged. They were convinced that their town had a special role to play, and that the education of new generations would be a key element. James Leslie was one of the first teachers in this classroom. The kids came to him from across the river, in summer by ferry or along the ties of the open railway bridge. In winter, they crossed the ice. They learned their lessons by day and returned home for chores by night. It was not easy, but then it was worth it. James Leslie and his pupils of 1892 would be very proud if they could look around now and see what their little stone school has become. Late on the night of April 7th, 1909, a telegram arrived with word that Saskatchewan's first university had been awarded to Saskatoon. Donning their gumboots and wading into the fields from Humboldt to Rosetown, the academics of the day broke with tradition.
One area of concentration that they started with, because we were an agriculture province, was emphasis on agriculture. And they would go out to the areas. They had trains organized in the summer, and the trains would have all the displays, how to, the right ways of plowing, disking, when you should, how you should, why you should.
Once again, the interdependence of rural and urban societies was to manifest itself in opportunity. Agrologist Dr. Lawrence Kirk of the university experimented with crested wheatgrass, reminiscent of red fife wheat, Developing a strain called fairway, it would sink roots as deep as 6 feet into the ground. The drier the summer, the better it did. The fairway strain rescued thousands of acres of prairie that would have been turned into desert in the Dust Bowl conditions of the 30s.
The people came into seminars and meetings in Saskatoon, and this university was a vital part of every community because they went out. They went out and they talked to the people, and the people asked their questions, and the letters that went back and forth between a specialist at the university and a farmer who had a problem. And it's continued. We've sent pharmacists out to small town and dentists out to the northern bush. There are veterinarians throughout Saskatchewan who've been trained right here at this university. And it's a fulfillment of that dream that's just ongoing.
To that place we call home. Down that long road, throughout life we roam. Whenever I go, to that place I know it'll always be home, home to me.
The people of Saskatoon have discovered their sense of being, from the original Cree who gathered on the banks of the river, to the temperance colonists, to the present. Dealing with isolation has spurred on the capacity to dream, to imagine what could be.
The people who came to this place on the banks of the South Saskatchewan River, whether 1,000 or 100 years ago, recognized its power and its beauty. The pioneers who came stayed, cultivating its soil and its unique culture. It was their collective and individual energy that made Saskatoon. The Queen of the North is as deeply rooted in its past as in the spirit and ambition of each new generation.
Whenever I go, to that place I know it'll always be home.